I have 1 minute, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So, hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin the webinar here right after I do this quick little intro. So thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just about 45 seconds. I want to take a minute to let you know a little bit how OMA is growing a little bit stronger in 2021. So we've evolved to a better, more efficient approach to supporting state industry, individual manufacturers, and just in general, the way that we are going about business. So one of the ways we want to share that is through detailed expertise, through these webinars. This is just a brief overview of the new program that we have called Aligning Structure to Achieve Strategy. One of the changes that OMA made at the middle part of last year is forever, since our existence, we have really been just a connector of resources. We are still that connector of resources and still support all of our partnerships in the way we always have. One of the things that we started doing is investing money in people, in certification, training, so that we are now a manufacturing consultant. So we are now the doer and not just the connector. So we are doing the stuff that we would connect people to from a service provider perspective now moving forward. This particular subject, aligning structure to achieve strategy, Daniel has been on site delivering this over the past probably 2 or 3 weeks. So we have him on board to help facilitate and help host this webinar. So as we have questions, either Daniel or I myself will be able to address those. Let's see, I will go ahead and hit the start button, and as soon as I can find it, get to the right screen, and we'll get started. This right here is 37 minutes long. If you have questions, please dump them into the chat and then to the chat box. Daniel or I will address those. We'll also have time at the end for questions as well. So I will go ahead and get this started.
Thank you for that introduction. Appreciate being here today and you taking time out of your day to talk about this continued series of how to optimize the organization. As what has been mentioned, today the topic is aligning structure to achieve your strategy. And as I've said, I'm Shane Barber with the Business Excellence Group and be glad to take you through this topic today. And so a lot of people, when they become unhappy with how their business is running, they first will go to immediately their structure. How does that occur? They'll go right to an org chart and say, it's not effective, people aren't doing their roles, our leadership team is not executing. And this is why, if you've ever been in a company that has done a reorganization effort multiple times in 1 year, it's because they think the fix is, let's look at the structure, the reporting relationships, and the accountability of those leaders, change it, and everything will be fixed. But that couldn't be more wrong. And so this is the model that OMA utilizes to help optimize organizations. It's also a model to help avoid that. And so if organizations are not in alignment, they're not effective or not being optimized, well, you gotta, all of the goals of the organization must be in alignment to the strategy. And so there's 6 critical areas, 6 cylinders in our model to go with the car analogy. And cylinder number 1 is strategy. And if your strategy is missing or if it's unclear, it's going to equal alignment issues. And those alignment issues are with leadership or misalignment with executing to the metrics, to the goals, to your customers' needs or stakeholders' needs, up into including even if you have a board. This next cylinder, which today we'll be talking about, is structure. And in the structure cylinder, this is where hierarchy lives, this is where decision-making is, and this is where accountability for your leadership team and reporting structure for the rest of the organization is. And if it's not aligned to the strategy, you're going to get siloization. Each function in the organization is going to interpret the strategy on their own, do what they feel is necessary to achieve it, and now you have silos. People live in the structure, and in this cylinder number 3, these are the people practices. So once you get your structure set, clear on decision-making, clear on reporting structure, clear on accountabilities at the leadership level, then you have to look at all of the roles that roll up to that structure, starting at leadership, and put the right roles in place, the right work activities, responsibilities, accountabilities, behaviors. And if people aren't empowered or enabled through clear job expectations, then you're going to see lack of engagement. And that's another issue organizations see. Methods and tools, if no standards are set, you'll see variance. And if you have variance, it's because you're not efficient. And so this is where the world of lean manufacturing lies, or continuous improvement. And so this is a cylinder here that you must tie into your strategy. And then the last two cylinders, one is lateral processes. This is how people work together to coordinate their work efforts to achieve the strategy and communicate how things are going. And if the organization is not functioning, you might want to look at this cylinders, especially if coordinating across the organization is left to chance, then you're going to have breakdowns, communication, and collaborating towards one goal. And then the last cylinder is rewards and metrics. Metrics and rewards, if they do not directly support the organization, support the growth that the strategy has in it, then you won't achieve it. And if you don't have common goals, people won't behave to this. You must have common metrics and goals for the strategy with your leadership team and the structure. And then you must have those metrics and goals clear to each individual on what they own that will help contribute to the end strategy. So again, this is the straight 6 model. These are 6 cylinders or 6 pillars that every organization should look at to optimize their company. And today we're going to be talking about structure and how do we align structure to strategy. At the bottom here, it says, I like to think of these as check engine lights that I've covered with you in the last couple minutes here. And if you're seeing any of these symptoms of alignment issues to strategy, where you're too tactical and you're not strategically managing your business, then that's an issue. If you're siloed and leaders are doing their own thing and not communicating, collaborating, that's a warning sign. If people aren't engaged or don't seem engaged in achieving the strategy, it's because their roles aren't clear. If your products, tools, services, support has variance in the end outcomes, then you probably need to look at your methods and tools because they're inefficient or they're not in alignment. And then if your communication and collaboration processes are inexistent, and most of yours are, most people will say they have a 1 time a week leadership meeting, or worse yet, they meet with their operations personnel once a week. They stand up and talk about the schedule when issues are. Ask yourself, is that enough to achieve a strategy, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, multiple years? And then lastly, rewards and metrics. Metrics drive behavior. If they don't have common goals, you will see different behaviors. If you see different behaviors, again, it's a check engine light. The hypothesis is if you have alignment, your organization will be effective. If it's effective, it'll be optimized. So again, today we're talking about strategy, and we're looking for these warning signs. We can diagnose this. In previous webinars, we've talked about the free assessment that the OMA offers. It's the Business Excellence Assessment. And this assessment, 54 questions, looks at all 6 cylinders. We come in, we have you take the assessment. We create a 2-hour debrief session with you and your leadership team to look at your scores that you take. And then we talk through this to find out what the root cause is, what your leadership team's recommendations are, get them engaged, get them enrolled in optimizing the company, and we'll give you our recommendations all for free. And so we can diagnose that. And that's why I was harping on the check engine lights here. So we have assessment process if you want to go deeper. So why do strategies fail? Strategies often fail as it's related to structure and because they don't align their structure to the strategy. So when leadership develops strategies that will change how the business operates, they underestimate the impact to the structure. They underestimate the reporting structure, the decision-making. They underestimate what it does to the roles that live in the structure. And so you got to look at your structure to see if it's in support. If your strategy is to drive quality with velocity, high quality with high on-time delivery, and you have your quality organization reporting to production, that is probably not a good structure. Why is that? Because when the pressure's down to speed up on-time delivery, the one leader that both quality and production report to is going to put pressure, but goal pressure, and that quality team is probably going to skip the inspection steps so they get the on-time delivery. If the quality is bad, then the production team's probably going to slow down and get quality. And it's much better to have an impartial party managing your quality department. So that probably be under your operations manager, not your production manager. So that's an example of where, and we'll expand on that in a couple slides here, where you need to align your structure to it. If you have siloization, it's caused by poor structures and it causes independence versus interdependence. Organizations operate independently. Sales has their own goals and their own strategy. Production has its own goals and strategies. Engineering, design, own goals and strategy. Office, and we have to have one set of goals, one strategy to tie the entire organization together across the silos and work interdependently. Fancy word for one goal, one team to get that strategy implemented. So you have to make sure your structure is aligned that way. If your structure is not aligned to the strategy, then the company will be going in many different directions because of those silos, because of that independence. And most organizational structures, they're put together with little thought of how information and workflow. And so we really don't think out how the workflow is going to be, how information is going to flow. It's basically, if to make it really simple, two people dream up an idea, they start up a company. When they hire their first employee, that's where the structure starts. Who's going to manage them? Well, I'll manage the finances, you manage the production. Okay, great. This is a sales role. Okay, that'll align to the business manager of that two-person team. And then you hire a couple technicians that will report to the person that's running operations. And that org chart becomes organic, and often they're inefficient and ineffective, and I'll explain how in a minute. So structure of the organization. The structure of an organization is a formal way people report and work together. Think of an org chart. It draws your direct reporting lines. It draws how your workflow is, and then it draws how your hierarchy works. And so it structures define that hierarchy, and it builds the power relationships in the organization. Who has the decision making? Who holds the power? Who can veto it? In the end, who is the one that's going to set the tone for the organization? It also defines departmentalization of each of the organization's departments. And we divide them up: engineering, production, sales, office, of which I've mentioned. So as organizations start to get bigger, it departmentalizes it. It puts it into departments, functions of the organization. And we got to make sure we tie those functions together. It defines the organization's value streams and your product lines, your departments, and how they need to work together to achieve the strategy, achieve the tactical execution. And no one structure is best for every organization. And so I've said a lot of structure about 15 times here. What does that really mean? Well, let's take a look at some common structures. There's 3 common structures we'll look at today. And we'll go through those in detail. Every structure involves trade-offs and compromises, and we'll look at those. And then the structure enables the organization to achieve its strategy. It binds it together if it's a healthy structure, so everybody works interdependently. So typical approaches, though, I've mentioned this already. Owner and leader starts up a company. People are hired and given a manager. The reporting relationships are not well thought out. People don't get consistent direction, or they might even have 2 different bosses because one manager has good quality understanding, the next manager has good inventory. So they say this one person will work for both people, and that never works for the employees. So they get the inconsistent direction, and then the company doesn't obtain the desired results. It's just how it flows down from leadership all the way through the organization. And then the silos begin. The silos get built. And so the common problems, if you're wondering if you have these problems, do you have friction in your organization? The most common friction is between production and engineering, or production and design, whatever you call it in your company. Design wants to create a design that'll meet the customer specifications. Production wants to produce it in the fastest time possible to meet those specifications, but yet hit their metrics. And so often, if they don't have common goals, one is after quality, one is after speed. And we'll talk about that in a bit. So that's friction. There's friction between sales and production. Sales says yes to everything, we can sell it. Production gets it and they're like, no way we can have this produced in 5 days. It's a 7-day cycle time to get this product built. Why did we tell the customer yes? So that's friction. Those silos don't talk together, they don't plan together, they don't work together to achieve that goal. Those are other common problems. Leadership action is slow because they sometimes will have to go clear up the production silo over to the senior leader to engineering. Then engineering talks to their people back up to engineering and then back over to production to where we have an agreement made. So it can be sluggish. And then no one seems to be accountable because everybody is accountable. Who's going to do that? I thought you were doing it. I wasn't doing it. I thought you were going to do it. And that can be common problems. If you're seeing those, a lot of probably the root causes lie in your structure. What causes it? Lack of leadership alignment, independent versus interdependent leadership, people working in those silos, lack of clear decision-making. Who makes the decision at the leadership team? Who can veto it? Who can give input to it but doesn't make the decision? And then lack of accountability. You want to strive for single point accountability where one person's accountable, not two, because if it's two, not one of them will get it done. And so that can cause it. The fixes: create common metrics for the leadership team, develop a decision-making process, and develop a structure that has single point accountability and reporting. And so these are all common problems, causes, and potential fixes that you may be seeing in your organization today. So if you're seeing any of these, your check engine lights are going off, but let's get down to, how to effectively structure an organization. So to do that, I want to continue to emphasize where these breakdowns happen. So we've already talked to the friction, the silos, slow leadership action, but let's use an example. I've started using one. Let's say for the company, there is some metrics, quality, and there's a metric on velocity or a metric on on-time delivery, the speed of getting it delivered. And so it's very common where engineering in my past life would come across the aisle to me as a supervisor when I was a supervisor and say, we need to shut down your tool because it's producing bad quality. My feedback would be, I'm not shutting down the tool. I'm only held accountable for velocity, for number of widgets out the door. So we'd get into a disagreement and I'd say, I'll take down the tool, but we got to get agreement from senior leadership. And then I got to decommit the goal I set today because they're going to hold me accountable for it. So engineering escalates it all the way up to most senior leader, over to the senior leader of manufacturing or production. The decisions made between the leader of engineering and manufacturing in the structure of, we got to take the tool down. They go all the way back down to me as a supervisor and say, give them the tool. And I would commonly say, great, I goaled 1,000 units out of this today. We're going to have to decommit it. It's going to be down for 25% of the shift. I need to decommit my goal by 250 units. They agree, I take the tool down, and I'm not held accountable for it. And so if you don't have common goals, it's not a quality or velocity, it's quality with velocity. And this is a true story. It used to be engineers were measured and managed under quality. Manufacturing was managed and measured under velocity. They changed the metric to quality with velocity. They gave us one boss over manufacturing and engineering, one decision maker. And before you know it, we started working together. Engineers taught me how to work to watch tools for poor quality. I taught them on inventory flow and when was the best time to take tools down. We made decisions, we never escalated. So that's the demonstrating siloization. It's also demonstrating if you don't have a common goal and if you don't have a common reporting structure, people will only behave to their metrics. And so you gotta, and then they'll work independently. To work interdependently, you gotta have those common goals and to work across the organization. Another way to continue to illustrate this is you'll see common things like communication is inefficient or even absent. Engineering and manufacturing don't even talk. Coordination becomes transactional. The tool's running bad quality. You don't want to take it down. Fine, then we'll produce bad quality. Or even if we do take it down, there's not good cooperation, and collaboration happens if leadership demands it. In my case, Shane, take the tool down, and I did. And so all symptoms and all issues created by ineffective structure that creates silos. So how do you mitigate the silo effect? Well, think about these pillars as the pillars to a bridge, and think about the organization as a vehicle. and think about how do you get it cut across the organizations from when you market it, you sell it, you design it, and then you produce it and you ship it. This vehicle has to be able to drive across the organization, get cooperation from everyone to be able to hit those results. And so management processes in your structure must require cross-functional collaboration to accomplish the strategic objectives and the goals. But the way to do that is to link them together like a bridge, and to have company operations management that oversees all three, in this example, of these organizations. So this would look like having, instead of three separate leaders, you might have a department manager for sales, a department engineer, a department manufacturing manager, but they report to the COO, Chief Operations Officer. Some organizations have sales reporting into the CEO, and then they'll only go take the direction from the CEO. It's much more healthy to have one manager, one boss cutting across one set of metrics, common goals, metrics, and methods, so the vehicle can drive across the organization to get its product out the door. So structure is all about common structure, and at the bottom, common goals, so the vehicle can achieve what it needs to achieve. So it's got to work in an interdependent, cross-functional way to be able to achieve this. Most organizations work in the silos. So fixes: lining structure to your strategic plan. If you have quality issues and you have delivery issues, then you want to set in your strategy. You got to have a strategy for quality with velocity. You want to have common goals to that strategy, common actions, and you want to have common teamwork, common reporting structure to deliver that strategy. And you want to define those reporting relationships. And then in your structure, you got to look at effective spans and levels. Spans is how many people report to one manager. And studies show 10 to 15 is the sweet spot, but it's often common to have 25 to 35. I've been in production, manufacturing companies where the production manager has 50 direct reports. That's an ineffective number of spans that person is managing. It's unrealistic that they can manage, grow, and hold 50 people accountable and develop their careers and their talent so they can achieve it year over year. Levels in the organization is how many levels up in the organization do you have? So you want to have effective spans and levels. You want the flattest organization you can with the least amount of levels, senior leader or owner, somebody that's managing the people and people doing the work. That's a really simple, 3-level only. There's individual contributors, there's supervisors, then there's a manager leader. More complex organizations need more levels, and we'll look at those in a minute. But it's all about aligning the strategy to the structure, the structure to the strategy. If not, you'll wear the organization out and it'll break down. Common 3 types of structures I've mentioned. Functional. I've mentioned the functional. Functional is you have an engineering function, a manufacturing function, and a sales function. And then you might have a staff, an office staff. That's very common for small organizations, and it can be very effective and very streamlined. As you grow bigger, you may have multiple products, and you might have multiple divisions producing those products. So you would have division A that could be doing brake assemblies and parts. You get a division B that's doing the block of the motor, to continue with this car analogy, and then division C that is doing the chassis. Very common in companies like Ditch Witch in the great state of Oklahoma, where you're at today, where they have multiple divisions. In those divisions, you still may have this functional engineering. You need engineering in division B, manufacturing in division B, and sales. Or sales might be up across all those divisions. And so this is an example of more complex structure, and the more complex, the more specific structure, accountabilities, and decision-making needs to be. The last common one is geographic. You might have multiple locations. I've said Ditch Witch just because I know it's a big company in Oklahoma. You might have Ditch Witch that's in Oklahoma, Ditch Witch that's in Wisconsin that does casting. Ditch Witch that's in, could be Mexico. I don't know, but could be by location. And then you would have functional underneath each location. And then that would roll up to a senior leader, and then ultimately roll up to a CEO of that company. So 3 types of structures. Which one's the right structure for you? Pick the one that's most simple. You have one product line, one location, functional is probably good enough. Multiple product lines that do not share equipment or personnel, then you probably have divisions. If you have multiple locations, then you may have geographic. Point is, employees need to know who their manager is. They need to have managers that work at their location to give them direction and give them feedback. Well, let's break down functional even greater. There's positives and negatives for each one of these. The positives is employees like it because it's really clear. I work in engineering, I have an engineering boss, and I know who my boss reports to. Decision-making goes up, not across. Engineering makes decisions on their designs, manufacturing makes it on manufacturing, sales makes it on sales. It can be efficient. It's simple to scale. It really pulls on functional excellence. You get really good at engineering, really good at manufacturing and sales because each department can work on getting better and continuous improving, and provides a focus on talents and depth in career in the department you work in. The negatives: doesn't encourage innovation across the organization. Manufacturing knows how to redesign something because they're dealing with the issues every day, but if they don't communicate with engineering, engineering doesn't know to redesign it different. As an example, people tend to focus inward, only on their silo. It's not flexible. To cross the silos, sometimes it's like walking 1,000 miles when it's minutes apart. Hard to integrate across the organization because it depends on the management team, which is usually dysfunctional. Dysfunctional described by being siloed and working independent. And if they're not working towards one set of goals, they are dysfunctional. And I don't mean to offend, but it is a reality. And it's hard to coordinate for customers. Customer has an engineering problem, who do they call? Customer has a manufacturing on-time delivery, who do they call? They might call CEO, but it's hard to coordinate across the organization. So, but they can be extremely well. You can leverage the positives here and minimize the negatives. Product or customer focused, positive and negatives. Moves decisions down to the general management level. How does so? It moves it down to the division of the organization. If you're allowing the organization to work that way, if you're allowing it to be decentralized, meaning division A can make its own decisions and have its own sub-strategy to the corporation. B can have its own decisions on methods, on materials, and on manpower, and same with division C. And so each division can focus, get really good at their product, increases line of sight because you're only working a division, accountability and identity. Each division has its own identity. The negatives: may not seek outside synergies, sharing with other divisions. While you might not have exact commonalities of how you get work done, but you may have the same equipment, you may have a similar method, and so you often don't share best known methods. To be able to really drive those best known methods across the company. And then key decisions: what to do the same across all divisions and what to allow to do differently. That might slow an organization down. What you're required to be exactly the same with, and then what you don't require. So it's another level of complexity. Geographic structure, positives: creates local focus. Ditch Witch in Oklahoma can focus on its location, its metrics, and its sub-strategy of the company. And then location B and C can do the same. It's up to the senior leader to hold all three of those locations together and make sure that they're meeting the company structure, the corporate structure. Creates accountability for the head of the region, holds their accountability, but somebody's got to hold all regions accountable. So each region is coming in. The negatives: creates barriers to global commonality. Whatever they have in common, they're not open to sharing, or it's not easy to share. Regions will start to diverge in their standards, start to do things different. It is inevitable if you don't have a lateral process forcing them to share and talk about it. Doesn't leverage resources. Hard to get a location to send engineers to location A when they're having design issues that they have talent in another region. And so flexibility could be reduced. And clients may get integrated solutions with the region, but not across the regions. You may have a brake problem, you may have a casting problem, engine problem, you may have a chassis problem, but all three of these got to talk together to solve the problem if it's affecting the entire vehicle, so to speak, or the part that integrates all three of these together. Lastly, I've mentioned centralized versus decentralized management systems. Centralized, this comes into play where you have a parent company managing multiple divisions or managing multiple divisions that that have similar work or different work. So centralized management is where the parent company or corporation, they set the policies and the practices for all divisions that are in different geographies, and even if they have different products and services. So they'll set core processes on that must be centralized or must be replicated by each division. Keeps the division consistently following one rule, one way of operating. This could be the way they design. This could be the way they do their financial management, their sales, their training, onboarding, hiring as examples. It reduces the resources needed at the division level, but restricts them to the rule. And so it reduces resources needed to division because you can do it centralized. You have one group, smaller group working on it, but yet it restricts everybody to one rule. And so versus decentralized, the divisions has complete control of their policies and practices, but yet they could vary. And if it's a non-related business, like Johnson & Johnson has many different businesses, and it doesn't cross over, and two products don't even meet in the same place for the consumer, then they might allow them to have that autonomy to act. Works best when divisions have nothing related, as I've mentioned, and has the authority to manage their own division. Reduces the amount of local control, that the company has over the centralized. So you can have, each of the divisions can manage its own business from that perspective. So this is for highly complex. For smaller companies, medium companies may not be as relevant. But if you have multiple divisions, two companies in Oklahoma, one in Oklahoma City, one division, one in Tulsa area, do you have centralized or you have decentralized? What do you require from all to do the same? What do you allow them to do different? So all technical things in structure to be thinking about. Lastly, what is leadership's role in aligning the structure? Well, leaders must ensure that they have the following in place. They have direct line reporting, minimizing complexity. Why do I bring this up? Matrix reporting, where an employee has two bosses, never works out for the employee. You might choose to do that because one person has technical expertise on design, one has it on inventory, and that person does, that person has some level of design input and some level of what they have to do with inventory and those products and specialization. And so don't ever organize your structure around simplicity for management. Do it for your employee. They deserve to have one boss, one set of directions. Ensure that each employee has one manager, as I've mentioned, to manage their development, manage their employment. They go to one person for direction, one person for decisions, one person for advice, one person for mentorship. Reduce the complexity with reporting relationships. This one can have many pieces to it. One, nepotism. People reporting to one another that have relationships, personal relationships. You may allow that in your company, but that adds complexity. You want to reduce that. Family relationships. I worked in a major hospital where the CEO's wife managed the gift shop, but the HR manager, which reported to the CEO, the wife of the CEO reported into the HR manager. And one day she had a question about inventory. She wasn't questioning that she was stealing or ordering stuff without approval. She just had questions on it. You don't think that didn't make it home to the CEO? That CEO came back to work on Monday, said, "You ruined my weekend," held their direct report accountable. And the poor HR manager was like, "Am I the lucky one managing my boss's wife?" And so you want to reduce that complexity. Relationships within the company. People that are married, people that are dating, people that are children, father and sons. I've worked in organizations where, I've had you've had the father doing the order pulling, and then the son actually doing the pick and pack to put it in a box to ship it. They already have their hands full at home if they were living together, or if they're, at family functions. Let's compound that by doing it at work. The father might say, "I can manage my son or daughter. but the son or daughter may not like it. So why have that complexity? Ensure minimum and maximum spans. That means how many people report to one person. Again, the sweet spot's 10 to 15 per employee, per manager. You want employees to have the time to spend with their managers and vice versa, so they get clear direction, good coaching, and good performance direction. Levels in the hierarchy are minimized. Leaders should minimize the levels and not put artificial levels in there. Sometimes they invent jobs for people. Hey, I think they'd be really good managing somebody. Let's put a supervisor between manager and employee and let them manage a couple people. That's ineffective spans. It's a waste of money to have one person only manage 2 people. And it's ineffective levels. You know, a lot of companies will say people are supervisors on the floor, but they're really leads. They're doing their own work and they're managing other people's work and they're on the same work team. And so why put a supervisor level in there when you don't need it? Have people that do the work, people that oversee the work, and then people that manage the organization. And so with that, I'm sure there are tons of questions on structure, the 3 types of structures, centralized and decentralized, the pitfalls of structure, and you know, what a manager needs to do to be able to align it. In summary, you got to align the structure to your strategy. If your strategy has a new technology that's coming on, you might want to put somebody over that new technology, put that in your structure where you create a new role, you internally fill that with somebody that has the technical knowledge of it, and then they might have a couple technicians that are supporting them doing the research and development on that. That's an example of changing your structure to align to your strategy. We need somebody focused full time on that new technology. They need to have a couple resources and some equipment to do the R&D. And if you don't change your structure and think that you're going to do R&D while you're doing mass production and while people have multiple things to do in their day and their job, it's likely not to happen, likely not to land your structure or your strategy. So if you have more questions, we're going to open it up here in a second. But one thing I'd like to say is we have a full product set or offering where we help you look at your current state structure, understand what you're trying to achieve and how you're growing your company. And then we can help you restructure your organization, reporting relationships, the levels of your organization, and then ensure that it's simple, it's direct reporting lines, and it's effective and efficient. So with this, I'll talk about the next webinar is going to be, and then we'll turn it over to question and answers. And I believe a colleague of mine, Daniel, that has just done this recently with a company and looked at their structure, that he will be answering those questions. So our next webinar is going to be on single point accountability and decision making. We're going to be talking about how do you reduce overlap and role redundancy in your structure? How do you hold the structure accountable to executing the strategy? And that is your leadership that heads off your departments in your structure. We're going to define the decision-making process and how to make it single point and how to make it effective. And then we're going to talk about how do you give people authority and the accountability to act. So that's our next webinar coming on. Check online, and the dates are on there. Sign up, and we'll be glad to take you through that. With that, thank you for your time. I know it's valuable. I know this is a simple topic to talk about, but it's detailed and difficult to understand what structure you have and what you should have. And we'll open it up to Q&A. I'll turn it over to Daniel and Donovan of the OMA to be able to manage that part of the webinar. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All right, everybody, thank you. Quick question. Daniel, your audio working okay on your end?
I believe so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Folks, I don't know if you all can see my screen and all that stuff still. I have some technical issue going on. My screen is totally black. I tried the Control-Alt-Delete Task Manager, go to that. Well, I just did the Task Manager now and it let me back in. But during the webinar, mine had gone blank. So, all right. So it looks like we're back in action now. Quick question that I would have for the rest of the group. Actually, I'm asking the group, is there any questions at all from anybody? If so, throw them down in the chat box. Let's see. Somebody surely's got to have a question. This is the one of any category. This is probably the one that is the hardest to grasp of any of those. Would you agree with that, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shane alluded to this, that this would be a support for a business after they've done structure, the
Or
take it to
strategy?
10, and the strategy to action. What this tool does really well, and the vast majority of this is just going through and talking through to make sure that the right positions are in your organization to make sure that you can meet that 12 to 18 month strategy to action. So it doesn't talk about people's names. We don't use, well, this person would fit there. That's not the negotiation. The talk is really around, this is the strategy for the business. These are the actions that we have to go do. How do we structure our organization to make the decisions that are needed to be made inside that strategy to action, and make them most efficiently, where we don't have to waste time negotiating between groups or the people doing the actual work. They know very quickly who to go to and how to solve problems. It's also the most emotionally difficult one, and should be walked into very slowly. People, as we all know, people find identity, a lot of identity, and rightfully so, in the work that they do. And the end of this, there is a communication plan. So we won't leave without making sure that your structure line will test that structure with different real problems that happen inside your organization. And then we will come up with a communication plan that helps you gently and purposefully maneuver your organization to that new strategy or that new structure. I apologize.
Okay, no, that makes total sense. One of the things that I often see or hear is, let's just start at the very beginning. Let's go back to strategy for just a moment. Everybody says, yeah, we got a strategy. And when you start really analyzing the I guess the outline of your strategy, what process you followed, then that's really what's lacking. The example that I use is my neighbor over here. I ask him what his lawn care strategy is next, this summer. I'm going to mow my yard once a week. And that's not really a lawn care strategy. And he turned around and he asked me, he said, what is your lawn care strategy? And I'm like, aha, I'm glad you asked. On March 15th, I'm going to lay down a pre-emergent selective herbicide. At the end of March, I'm going to lay down insecticide that's going to have bifrin in it because I have a tick issue out here. I live in the middle of the woods. And, starting on April 1st, I'm going to lay down fertilizer. I'm going to lay down 30-0-6, on and on. You get the point, with responsibilities, dates, timeline, accountabilities to it. So with regard to structure, the same kind of thing happens over here that I see, Daniel. And that is, companies are going to say, well, we have a structure. We have an org chart. Okay, that's the structure. Talk about that for just a minute, if you would, Daniel. Companies that look at this, they don't know what they don't know. Let's put it in that category to keep it real simple.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, not knowing what you don't know. Again, the key to this component here, and an organization that wants to change what they're doing, an organization like moving from one product into another product, an organization who is moving from a job shop into a manufacturing type process, an organization who is growing exponentially. All of that changes how people have conversations and who they go to get their problem solved. Ultimately, This is not really about aligning your org structure in a acute way. This is about streamlining the conversations that need to happen inside your organization to meet that strategy to action, so that there's efficiency, there's no rework inside of it, and people know at the end of the day, this is where I fit this is where I fit and where my role fits in not just the organization, but in that strategy to action. What Donovan was talking about, the very specific action items that will get me to win at the strategy. And because I know all of that stuff, at the end of the day, I know whether I've been successful or not that day and whether I need to adjust the next day. So this would be a very good tool to use if you fit in one of those 3 or 4 categories that I mentioned.
Gotcha. Well, let's go back to what Shane had talked about. Look at one of the warning signs. So if you plug in the code reader and you have siloization within your organization, well, how do I know I have siloization? I'm going to speak to a real world example that I lived through for about 4 years working for a commercial window manufacturer. In our weekly management review meeting, because of our quality system, we had one of these meetings that we had to do once a week. It was the same arguments week over week over week over week. And what Shane said was exactly right. Engineering is oftentimes aligned to quality. Production is aligned typically to velocity, get it out the door. That was our exact case right there. In the commercial window manufacturer, we were cranking out as many vinyl and aluminum windows as we could every single day to get on the loading dock. And cash flow was always really tight for us. And so we were measuring that weekly, not just monthly or quarterly, but down to the week. The problem with the structure that we had the operations manager that was overseeing quality, inspection, and production. He was incentivized, or let's just say his performance metric was just on getting it out of the door. And year 1, when I was there, we had, I think it was like $30,000 budgeted in field rework. And after 4 years, that number grew to almost $500,000 that we budgeted every year, that we allotted to go out and fix our mistakes. And so when these windows got to the end of production and there was a quality related issue, that one person was in charge of making that call. And he would make his call based upon, well, what is our shipping numbers looking like today? Do we have time to rework it? Do we have time to go upstream in our process? We don't have time to go and identify where the problem was necessarily, but we've got to go ahead and ship that out the door. And I got money in the budget to go out and fix it in the field if the customer even notices it. So what a horrible situation. I mean, for the salespeople, for the customer service people, and these same arguments were showing up in the weekly management review meeting. So that's just one indicator right there of siloization. So what I was trying to address with all that is, how do I know I need to look at my structure of my organization? So that would be one example. So I don't know if you ever lived through anything like that, Daniel, or you see anything like that while you're out in the field or not, but I just wanted to share that story with the group.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very common, very common. And it's the details are different inside each business, just because each business has a different focus. In your example, cash-based. Speed was important. In some, they're running to EBIT or EBITDA, where you're looking at a specific cost for a specific part. So you're measuring things a little bit differently. And having the ability to sit down and have a conversation around, this is again, we have our strategy, we have our action points, and this is how we want to measure success inside our business. And then aligning the structure of your business to those specific goals. Where, again, Donovan, that was a great example, and I've seen it in a lot of different big organizations, Black & Decker, Owens Corning, places like that, where that natural stress between quality and production is there, but they're not held to those same goals, where each production and quality are held to not just generating cash by pushing it out the door, but they're held equally to quality and production throughput, and being able to build your structure where those conversations happen very smoothly, extremely important to being successful.
Yep, gotcha. All right, just want to open it again to the all the participants, everybody that's here. We still have Chris Graham, Katie Jones, Kelly Duke, Laura Powell, Stacy Thornton. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box. I know this right here, there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of material involved, and a lot of it is stuff that is not commonplace or commonly talked about. So a lot of you are probably hearing some of this methodology for the first time, or I hope it's making sense. I hope it's resonating. Give us some sort of feedback. If you don't have any questions, at least give us feedback down here in the chat box. Was this helpful? Was it insightful? Did it give you a new way to possibly look at your organization or ways to improve your organization?
I think one other thing to add from the delivery side of this is a lot of, when you go into a lot of consulting firms, what you'll hear is somebody giving you a blueprint that says, this is what you need to do for your organization. You need to. That is not what we do. And that's not what this module is about. 70% of this module is facilitation. So it's me or somebody like me standing in front of you, asking questions, asking why, asking let's test it, and you developing what's best for your business. We are not the experts, and we don't try to be the experts at what we do. We are very good at facilitating conversations and helping you understand what makes sense for your business.
Yeah, that's a good point, Daniel. So if somebody's out there and they're saying, okay, I want to explore this further, what do I do? So regurgitating what you just said, we're not giving you a blueprint theory on paper and saying, here you go, have a nice day and good luck. We actually come on site and do the facilitation with you and walk you through this. I know you're on site right now at a manufacturer working on something a little bit different, but you just recently went through the aligning structure to achieve strategy with another manufacturer just within the last 2 weeks. So these are some of the services that we are doing as a consultant now. So early on, when I mentioned that we are now the doer, we are now the consultant that you can contract with to do these type of things, this is exactly this type of stuff we're talking about. So Kelly, I appreciate your feedback. The information was helpful and insightful. I enjoyed listening to this very much. So we got just a couple minutes. Any other questions, comments, or any concerns? I'm going to type in my email address down here in the bottom, and that way if anybody has any questions that come up over time, you can shoot them back at me and I'll get those back to you. Yeah, Stacy, I'm reading what you wrote here. Appreciate that. There's a lot to unpack here. There definitely is. Provides a mechanism to evaluate an organization and aids in evaluation and planning strategy. It sure does. And this is just one small section of what I would call the holistic business assessment. If you remember that 6-cylinder visual that Shane had at the beginning of the presentation, if you haven't gone through the assessment process, just real quick, it's a $7,000 assessment that OMA pays for. We receive federal funds, and that's part of our commitment to being able to deliver that to manufacturers. So we absorb the cost of that. Yes, we do charge for the delivery of our services on down the line, but as being part of a 501c3, we absorb the cost for that $7,000 to do the assessment. But the assessment is one where you take upon yourselves, and then we provide the feedback, and we facilitate a 2-hour discussion with your leadership team to go over the areas of strategy, structure, people, processes, tools, methods, metrics and the communication part about it, about that. We've done probably 30, 35 maybe of these year to date. So we've gotten into a groove. We've gotten really good at doing these. If we can do one for your organization, please let us know. But appreciate the feedback. We're going to wind this up. Before we shut it off, Daniel, is there anything else you want to add?
No, thank you for everybody for joining us again. If you've got any kind of questions about this or something strikes you later, please reach out to us, to either Donovan or myself. Donovan can put you in touch with me if you have any specific questions. But thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.